it's really the first of what we, the Montgomery County Black Council, hope will be an ongoing dialogue that we'll have with whomever is elected county executive this fall. With so much at stake here in the county, I really urge you to lean in and listen intently to the candidates' responses to issues around procurement, access to capital, and more. With that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator. Deborah Milo is the host of Montgomery County Cable Television, Mosaic and African American Perspective, and Montgomery County radio show, Montgomery Mosaic, on Radio 1's talk radio program on 1450 AM WOL. Deborah has an expansive career in media and public speaking for the county, including the voice of MC 311, Montgomery County 311, for those of you that have called in. She's also the host and moderator for numerous Montgomery County events. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Deborah Milo.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, good morning, county friends. It's an honor to be here to moderate the Montgomery County Black Business Council County Executive Candidate Forum here at the beautiful Silver Spring Civic Center, right here in downtown Silver Spring. You know, we often assume that we understand the duties and responsibilities of our elected officials. However, I'd like to share with you what the scope of the role of county executive actually consists of. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, great. The county executive oversees enforcement of the laws governing Montgomery County and provides executive direction to more than 30 executive branch departments and agencies to help deliver services to county residents. Now, among those departments and agencies are libraries, transportation, and police. Due to current legal and entitlement expenditures, funding from Montgomery County schools and public safety, roughly 86% of that county budget is already committed. Think about that, 86%. Now, one question that's probably on everyone's mind in the room today is how the next county executive will grow the discretionary budget through pro-growth business policies and regulations which will support Black enterprise and expand the county's tax base in lieu of property tax increases. Naturally, this question becomes especially important as companies like Discovery and its subsidiaries are leaving the county. Now, I'd like to introduce you to each candidate because I'm going to read just a quick clip of their bio, and I must tell you, they have all agreed to play nicely. All of them. I'll start with Roger Berliner, a Montgomery County resident for 28 years. Roger started a family here, sent his kids to our public schools, and committed himself to public service. He served on the county council for the past 11 years, serving 5 out of his 11 years as council president or vice president. Roger is a leading advocate for creating greater shared economic prosperity, investing in our public schools, and providing a world-class transit system. Next is David Blair. Hi, David. David Blair is a pragmatic, progressive Democrat who embraces Montgomery County's cultural richness and diversity and is committed to improving the quality of life for all residents. He's a successful entrepreneur. David's a lifelong resident of Montgomery County and brings 20 years of executive experience. You don't look that old. And vision to Montgomery County forward. David currently serves on a number of government committees and participates with various community and philanthropic organizations. Next is Marc Elrich. Marc has been an at-large Montgomery County Council member since 2006. He chairs the Public Safety Committee, serves on the Education Committee, and is the County Council's representative to the Metropolitan Washington Council on Governments, in other words, MCOG. Their Transportation Planning Board. Now, prior to his election to the County Council, he served on the Tacoma Park City Council for 19 years and taught at Rolling Terrace Elementary School for 17 years. Now we get to Mr. Robin Ficker. He's a lifelong county resident, honorably discharged from the U.S. Army. He's got degrees in engineering, public administration, and law. Robin, you've been pretty busy. He's a Montgomery Blair graduate. He completed 35,000 plus cases in Maryland court systems, overturned 3 state laws in federal court, and was appointed by Rosa Parks as General Counsel of National Caucus on Black Agent. He passed term limits charter amendment with 300,000 votes and 70% over opposition of every elected official. He's also a former elected member of the House of Delegates. Rose Krasnow, who I just had the pleasure of meeting. Rose is a 37-year resident of Montgomery County. She's a Montgomery County Public Schools alumni. She's former deputy director of the Montgomery Planning Department at the National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and she's also a 2-term council member and 3-term mayor of Rockville. Rose is also an economic development champion and has led the redevelopment of downtown Rockville and established the Rockville Economic Development, Inc. Last but most certainly not least, George Leventhal. George is a 4-term member of the Montgomery County Council and chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. He's Councilmember Leventhal has championed minority contracting opportunities, access to health care for the uninsured, housing for the homeless, environmental protection, mass transit, and measures to improve transparency in county government. Let's give them a hand, please. Now that you've heard a little bit of their backstory, I want you to remember that this is an opportunity for discussion. It's not a debate. It's an opportunity to understand the importance of how economic development priorities impact Black businesses. And it's also an opportunity to be inspired by these candidates. So now I'd like to invite you to the conversation. Let's begin. Okay. I'm going to start with you.
That's the problem with having the first D in this conversation.
Of course. Each of our candidates will get a chance to answer each question, and there are 4 questions total. Access to startup and growth capital remains a challenge for Black businesses, which constricts their ability to maximize their potential. Now, as county executive, what policies will you implement and how will you utilize the bully pulpit in order to increase access to capital for Black businesses?
Well, thank you for hosting this. It is an important conversation. The core of my campaign is creating greater shared economic prosperity. So with respect to access to capital, let me share with you one of the initiatives that I sponsored that our council passed that I am very excited about and I think will make a difference for Black businesses and minority businesses throughout our county. That was called a microloan program, something that has existed throughout the world, but that we didn't have in Montgomery County, where people that don't have access to capital because of perhaps bad debt can't walk into Wells Fargo and say, I need X, can come to our county now through nonprofits and get access to startup capital. Now, we started this small, $300,000 to 2 nonprofits who have great experience in this, mentoring people who seek loans, holding them accountable, and then making those loans and businesses thrive. If this program works, which I believe it will, we can expand it to include greater amounts of capital so that small businesses thrive. So one of the first things I did on the county council was work with our county to have dollars instead of put in big banks, which is where our county was doing it, out of the county, reinvesting in our community banks who then would have the ability to make loans to small businesses. I want to see how that program is working, because that was the whole objective there, was to take our dollars out of banks that have no relationship to Montgomery County and put them in our community banks where they would then be available to give loans to our small business community. I see Judy here in our community today. I created what's called the Small Business Navigator in order to ensure that small businesses get a break in Montgomery County, because it is hard to do business in Montgomery County. So I'm the only person here who actually bought a small business, owned a small business, and managed a small business. And so that is why I feel so strongly about small business. I want to give small business a break in Montgomery County.
Thank you. Edith?
Good morning. So when I think about capital for small businesses, I think about a couple different things. So one, Microloans have been popular since the 90s, and they can be effective. But the key around microloans is making sure that the business owners are aware that they exist and then walking them through the application process. Other opportunities to provide capital to small businesses. One, county government can do a better job working with the local banks to connect them with the small businesses and providing incentives to lend locally. And then thirdly, when I think about access to capital, I think about private equity money. And so that can either be like formal, venture capital money, or it can be less formal, like friends and family type money. So one, right here in Silver Spring, right, we're losing Discovery. And so this is an unbelievable opportunity to be reaching out to private equity firms that are in the communication or entertainment spaces, saying, hey, if you want to start your next business here, we have the talent. Because the talent's the hardest thing to find when you're starting a new business, so we should be able to attract money that way. Part of our economic plan is around incubators, and so we've come up with 6 different silos for incubators, and they range from hospitality to healthcare services to cybersecurity to green industries to our ag businesses. So like, for example, we should own hospitality. So what Marriott's done here over the last 90 years, there's so many great businesses in hospitality. And so we're going to have that incubator, and that'll attract private equity money as well as friends and family money. And eventually those companies will get bigger. They'll do Series A, Series B, and public offerings.
Thank you, David. Mark?
So I think all of us are probably pretty much on the same track. I mean, I think the incubator programs are really important. I think our incubator programs have been really weak. I went to a presentation at one of the incubators, and I asked them how they gave people business training. And they said we had brown bag lunches, and if people wanted to come, they came to brown bag lunches. And one of the big problems with people in incubators is you may have a great idea, but if you don't know how to operationalize it, how to put together spreadsheets and turn it into a business, your great idea may well sit there for a very long time. So I think we need to do a better job of preparing people for being able to get loans. I think Montgomery County has a reputation for giving our loans on the high end of the economic sphere. We know how much Marriott got. We know we have a vague idea of what Amazon would get. We don't do as much on the small business end, and I think we need to do more on the small business end. And I think we need to expand the investment in local banks, but the investment in local banks has to be tied to targets of what investments they're going to put back in the community. The county has an enormous amount of money. Some jurisdictions leverage that intentionally. We need to do a better job of leveraging that money intentionally. I think in general, we've got to do more than small loans. A lot of folks out there that I've talked to aren't in the microloan world. They're in the world of how do I make the next step to make my business bigger, and that's not a small loan, that's a substantial loan. I think the county just has to be a better partner with the business community, and I think this is a complaint that we actually hear across all small businesses in particular. They wonder why it's so hard for them to do business with the county and so much easier for other entities to do business, why our focus is on high tech and why our focus isn't broadly and more generically on people who are doing business in county in general. And I'd like to broaden the county's focus, because to me, anybody who's doing work and anybody who's creating a business has value. And we've got lots of empty spaces.
Thank you, Mark. Robin?
Good morning. I'm Robin Ficker, your next county executive. I studied for the bar with the Honorable DeLawrence Beard, a longtime judge here in Montgomery County, and I believe the first African-American circuit court judge. I met my wife at his house. His wife and my wife went to med school together, and they both took part in my wedding. I know, as someone who's run a law office in Montgomery County for many years, that most of the capital for small businesses comes from you. It comes right out of your wallet. In 2008, I put a question on the ballot, which all the elected officials opposed, to require a unanimous vote of the county council for the council to increase your property taxes more than the rate of inflation. This was after they increased property taxes and the budget 14%. It stopped property taxes cold in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. As a result, you have more, if you're a homeowner, more than $10,000 in your wallet than you would have if my ballot question hadn't passed in 2008. And then, of course, my term limits proposal got 300,000 votes over the opposition of every elected official. I'm going to keep your taxes down. I'm not going to raise your taxes. I'm not going to give you the 156% increase in the residential energy tax that our present council gave you and then said it was going to end in 2 years, but they changed their mind. I'm not going to give you a 30% increase in the real estate transfer tax, which the council gave you, which keeps minorities stuffed in apartments and... Thank you.
Rose.
Good morning, everyone. Rose Krasnow. You know, small business is really the backbone of our county, and what I think we sometimes forget is even some of our biggest companies like Marriott started in this county as a small business. And we know that certain groups, particularly minority populations and immigrant populations, may not have all the know-how that others, or access to capital. And so I think it's very important that the county step up its efforts. We have privatized economic development, but that we aren't really up to full speed yet with that effort. And I always laugh a little bit that government thinks we can tell business how to operate. We need to sit down with others who have done this before. We need to actually have a mentoring program for small businesses because we have many people in this county who are now retired who have the expertise that they need. And we need to really figure out what type of capital is best needed. I agree that we need to work with our banks because one of the things after the recession, it became a lot harder for small businesses to get the capital they need to move forward. And as county executive, I really want to make sure, since we do know, as I said, that it's these small businesses of 5 employees or less, that they feel that they're welcome in this county and that the county is providing them the support they need.
Thank you, Rose. George.
Yes, just to understand, if the bell rings once, it means we have 30 seconds. Is that, explain the bells, is that correct? Thank you. Okay, great. I'm George Leventhal. I, along with Councilmember Craig Rice, I have been the primary champion of minority suppliers and vendors on the County Council. I created the local small business reserve program. I have consistently advocated for minority contracting and for pushing the envelope as strongly as we can within the applicable Supreme Court decisions for minority set-asides. I included language in the law creating the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation that ensured that a substantial focus of that economic development entity would be small and minority businesses, including capital formation. Daniel Parra, the Small and Minority Business Coordinator for MCEDC, is here. His position exists because of the language that I added. Montgomery County purchases $1.1 billion a year in goods and services. That is the primary way in which the county can influence capital formation. Our procurement director, Cherie Branson, former county council member, just walked in. The county has a minority female and disadvantaged businesses program, minority female and disabled program, that awarded $218 million in 2017, and the local small business reserve program that I created awarded $93 million in 2017. We can do better. We need to assist businesses to understand how to register, how to be certified. You can't participate if you don't register, so you should go to montgomerycountymd.gov/LSRBP to participate in the local small business reserve. I know my time is running out. I'll have more to say. I am very proud to have recently been endorsed by the Honorable Kwesi Mfumi, former president of the NAACP and former congressman. If I'm your county executive, I will continue to champion small and minority businesses.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're going to start the second question, George, with you, if I may. The second question, candidates, is as county executive, how will you proactively engage, collaborate, and partner with Black businesses in regards to commercial and economic development policies, regulations, and laws which impact the county? And like I said, George, we'll start with you and we'll come back down.
I want to give Ike Leggett a lot of credit. He's done a very good job of community outreach, and he has a number of advisory groups, including an African American advisory group, Caribbean advisory group, and several others, Faith Community Advisory Council, several others. I would create a small and minority business advisory council, and I would continue my work to be out in the community. I've been endorsed for county executive by Martin Mayorga, one of our most impressive minority business success stories here in this county. And I went to visit him at Mayorga Organics up on Goody Drive recently. I said, "How can the county help you, Martin?" He said, "You're the first elected official who's ever sat here at this table in my office and asked me that question." The county executive's job is not behind the desk on the second floor of the executive office building. The county executive needs to be in the community, developing relationships, meeting with employers, and outside the county, marketing this great county, playing upon the diversity of our community as a great strength. We should be honored that people choose Montgomery County from around the world and around the United States, and we should play upon the fact that we are culturally competent, that we know how to do business in multiple languages with people from every different background. We should market ourselves better. We should invest more in marketing, and if I'm county executive, I will be a vocal cheerleader for our thriving business climate. Be very cautious when you hear politicians poor-mouth our business climate. That is not the way to help our business climate. We have a great story to tell. We need to do a better job of telling it. We need to listen more than talk. We need to pursue active relationships and be responsive when our constituents call us. My office has the best reputation for answering your phone call, helping you get your question answered and your problem solved. And that's the approach I'll take if I'm your county executive. Government that works for you and gets results for you.
Thank you, George. Rose, please.
You know, a cliche in politics is that our county should be a great place to live, work, and play. Ideally, where you live should also be able to be where you work. It would solve a whole lot of transportation issues. It would help build our economy. And one of the things I've been doing as I run for office is I've been actually meeting with members of the African American community and other groups to hear what their experience has been. And what I've heard has not been particularly positive about the efforts the county has made to help them. I still hear that the county professes to do business with this small business program, but that the aid is not really there that they're needing. I think that we know for a fact that we just don't have the right programs in place that are actually giving the assistance that people who are trying to start a business need. And when the economy tanked, so to speak, in 2008, and the nature of the whole office market has changed, what we have seen actually is a lot of professional people who have decided to start their own businesses. It is amazing to me to realize how many startups there have been in the last 10 years, and yet many of them aren't making it because we're not giving them the assistance they need. So it would be my hope as county executive to sit down with a group of people who have already succeeded in starting a small business, with those who are trying to do it, and figure out what we as a county can do to meet everyone's needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Robin.
Well, I want to say that I have never met a Montgomery County resident that I didn't like. I know you are going to be my boss, and every Monday morning at 6 a.m., earlier than this meeting, I'm going to have open hours to come and talk to the county executive about discrimination, about fairness, about how to move our county forward. First come, first serve. And I'm going to move that office of the county executive down to the first floor. I'm not going to be in an ivory tower because I want to hear from my bosses first thing every week, so I'll keep my head on straight and not be serving the special interests. Amazon. I want Amazon to come to Montgomery County. Lots of new jobs, spin-offs, etc. Why is it when we have hundreds of millions of dollars of your money invested in pension funds, health benefits funds, and county reserves, which have increased from 5 to 10% of the budget, why is it that we weren't taking advantage of the stock market last year, which went up over 25%, while these funds were earning less than 5%? Why didn't we own a lot of Amazon stock, Montgomery County? when that stock went up 75% over the last year? Why didn't we own a lot of Facebook stock, which went up 55%? Why didn't we own a lot of Apple stock, which went up 50%? Montgomery County wouldn't have a deficit. We'd have money to encourage entrepreneurship here in Montgomery County. I was the only one up here who went down to Annapolis and testified against that 20% in the regressive state sales tax that every little black child pays every day.
Thank you. Mark?
So I have a business background as well as a teaching background. I worked for a large corporation. I worked for Montgomery County local small business. I actually started the light manufacturing thing, making furniture when I was younger. And I've been through what it takes to get a business off the ground, and I know that it doesn't always work. And I have a sense of just how difficult this is. But Montgomery County is a different place now, and we've got to figure out how we make ourselves more welcoming and more helpful to people. I've dealt with a business owner in Wheaton who the permitting services came in and said, after 30 years of operating your restaurant, we want you to take out a counter, we want you to cut a wall through your bathroom, rearrange your bathroom, and the business owner was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to pay for this? How are we going to be able to continue to do business in Montgomery County? And if somebody hadn't come to me and said, this is what this guy's going through, I wouldn't have known to go to the county permitting services and say, shouldn't this guy be grandfathered? And on the verge of him making an investment that he probably wouldn't have been able to handle, permitting services said, oops, we should have grandfathered this guy. I tell you this because this is how important it is for us to be on the ground and us to know what's happening. But it also speaks to a culture that the person who needed help and tried to appeal for help up through the chain didn't get any help until a council member intervened. We need a government that doesn't require a council member or, frankly, executive intervention. We need a county government where everybody in these departments is sensitive to these issues, is aware of what small businesses are dealing with, and tries to work with them. And I don't think we do that enough. And so if I'm your county executive, I'm going to make sure that we work on the culture in Montgomery County. When we created the Economic Development Corporation, I wasn't the only one who felt this way. We abandoned some of the support we were giving local small businesses. And some of us feel really strongly, and again, I'm not alone in this, that we need people on the ground looking at the shopping centers and the offices.
David.
Yesterday, we released our economic growth and jobs plan. It's a 20-page document, and it's a culmination of hundreds of conversations with local businesses in Montgomery County, as well as our government officials, and as well as my experience growing a Fortune 500 company here in Montgomery County. Two things that I'll just point out that are in that document. One, creating a culture of yes is really important. Sometimes you hear, hey, we need to be more business friendly. It's probably the most overused, least understood word. What does business friendly mean? So let me give you a specific example. My wife opened up a business this past summer. It's a kids' play space in Rockville. And on the verge of opening it up, the electrician came in, inspector, and the inspector said, hey, the lighting looks great. We'll sign off on this next week. You're good to go. The following week, a different inspector comes in and looked at it and says, well, that'll never work. And we're like, well, what happened? He missed it. He just missed it. I hear that story all the time from other businesses where they get conflicting information. So to me, what business friendly means, if the inspector misses it, the county is going to pay for it. Another aspect of our plan that you'll see is education. So I was very fortunate that my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I saw that, and so it didn't seem so intimidating. But for many of our kids growing up, they don't have that kind of mentorship. So I would work with the public schools or have other county-sponsored programs to bring entrepreneurship programs to our young people so that they have the courage to start their own businesses, because small businesses will be the economic driver for Montgomery County.
Thank you, David. And I'll share mine. Okay.
I think the question was, sometimes hard to remember the question when you hear some of the answers.
I can repeat the question. As county executive, how will you proactively engage, collaborate, and partner with Black businesses with regards to commercial and economic development policies, regulations, and laws which actually impact the county?
Thank you. I'll give you an example of how I go about my work. black business leaders came into my office expressing concern about our minimum wage bill. They said, be careful how you do this because minority businesses struggle with, just struggle, period. So be careful as to how much you raise the minimum wage, how quickly. So I took that seriously, as well as the conversation I had with other minority leaders of businesses saying, we need to do this work, but we need to do it in a way that is sensitive to small businesses' concerns. And so I was one of those leading with Councilmember Katz to make sure that we did this work that was important work, but we did it reconciling the needs of our small business community. And I'm proud of the result that we achieved there. It was a 9-0 vote once we found the right middle ground. So that's how I go about my work. One, I'm a common ground kind of guy. I'm a collaborator. I am a listener. And I listen to the concerns of black small businesses and all small businesses because of my own small business background. As Mr. Elrich was talking about, when we created the Economic Development Corporation, many of us were concerned that small businesses would get lost in that. And literally on the day that we passed it, we had 5 votes to create small business assistance in county government. But we held off because we wanted to see how the Economic Development Corporation went about its work. Subsequently, we were confirmed that actually what we need to do is have things like a small business navigator, and then under my leadership, we created the Business Solutions Group. Again, seeking to make sure we listen to small businesses and know their concerns particularly.
Thank you so much, Roger. And actually, I'm going to start with you, so keep your microphone. I'd like to take the 3rd question and start with Roger, if I may. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about, as county executive, how you plan to impact the county procurement and regulation regime to improve contract opportunities for black businesses. And again, candidates, I appreciate you staying within the timeline. I really do. So let's go.
So understand that our procurement process, and I understand Cherie is here, and I know she's worked real hard on it, is among the most daunting aspects of our county government. It is complex, it is cumbersome, it takes a long time, and I hear about it all the time. And quite frankly, we haven't done well by African American businesses. We had a disparity study in 2015, I believe, it could have been 2014, disparity study, that showed that African American businesses, we did not meet the target for them in any of the years that had been studied. And as a result of that work, we had 2 task forces formed to try and see, okay, how can we make sure that our government procurement process actually works and works for the people that we intend it to work for? So I had businessmen come into my office the other day and said, Roger, we're not eligible to even bid on some of these contracts. That the people that get the contracts don't have headquarters in Montgomery County. So one of the things that I would do, knowing how hard we've worked on this, is I would still have a top to bottom review of our procurement process to make sure that it is working. Again, our process, I am told repeatedly, is more complex than the federal government's process. How can that be? So if you want small businesses to thrive in Montgomery County, they actually do have to have a shot at the procurement process that Montgomery County has.
Thank you so much, Roger. David.
Having done business with hundreds of public and private entities, I've seen good procurement and I've seen bad procurement. And one of the things that we want to do is really, from the bottoms up, go through our procurement process. Last year, we awarded roughly $1 billion of contracts. Less than 7% went to African American organizations. So we can clearly do better than that, right? We're an incredibly diverse community, and that's not enough. Just 2 quick ideas on procurement that I'll share with you. One is the waiver program. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the way it works is if a prime contractor wins a piece of business, there's oftentimes a requirement that they use a minority sub. Well, they can get out of that provision through a waiver program. Last year, we lost $32 million that could have been awarded to minority businesses, but the prime contractor was able to get a waiver for that. And secondly, when we think about procurement, we ought to make sure we have the businesses registered. Today, we have less than 5% of the businesses that are registered business in Montgomery County are minority-owned firms. And then lastly, the debrief session. So this is pretty simple. So if a minority firm loses out on a government contract, you want to have a formal debrief with that client, right, or that company, to give them every single chance to win next time. And so it can be just as simple as saying, okay, you didn't win the business because you don't have a 24-hour call center, or you're missing these aspects on your technology, so that when the contract comes up for renewal the following year or 2 years later, they have the best chance to win.
Thank you, David. Mark, would you like me to repeat the question? I know
Yeah,
sometimes
say
it
it
can
again.
get a little muddled down the line. The question is, as county executive, how will you impact the county procurement and regulation regime to improve contract opportunities for Black businesses?
Well, I think what we've found is that even though we have a large amount of money going to minority businesses, it's concentrated in some areas. In some areas, minority businesses pretty much can't get through the door. It's not even across all fields, and I think we need to look at that. So total dollar figures could be a little bit deceiving. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, you know, I didn't win a contract and I don't understand why. And when I would say, did you lose? Do you know what the other bids were? And people would say to me, sometimes we're told that we just need to get to know people. And in my mind, there's no way that getting to know anybody should have anything to do with how contracts are given out. This is about a point system. It's about the value of the work you put up there. And if we're getting contracts where people are bidding comparable sums to do the work, and they're being told that we just don't know people, or you need to know people, that's a problem. And one of the things I want to get to is a more transparent process. I'm interested in bidding processes where the bids are open for a period of time. People can see low bids, can revise low bids, know what they're bidding against, and then have point systems to make sure that we have accessibility to minority and, you know, women-owned and other small business entrepreneurs. I think we've got a problem in the county because we've been at this a long time, and we still have people who are very unhappy with how far we've gotten after doing this a long time. I don't know how we do this. I don't know how we do better without making a commitment to getting deeper into the processes and making sure we understand what the issues are. And I think we need to have frank discussions with people who lose bids and have conversations. Why do you think you lost the bid? And we need a review process internally to look at bid processes and say this bid made sense or this winning bid didn't make sense, without checking ourselves, as opposed to just looking at gross metrics at the end of the year. We really don't know how well we're doing.
Thank you very much, Mark. Robin, please.
I'm not going to need a citizens advisory committee to tell me what discrimination is. I know what it is. I've represented 20,000 minorities in court cases, many of whom have been treated unfairly. Rosa Parks was a friend of mine. They made her sit in the back of the bus. Now the council is trying to put us back in the bus. We need to open up Montgomery County and get it moving again. That will allow more money for the procurement process. We need to open up I-270. My car is a 2009 Ford Escape Hybrid. I've got 405,000 miles on it. The only miles I've been in a bus have been with the Maryland wrestling team going up to the Grapple in the Garden. Muhammad Ali was a friend of mine. He was the most generous person I've ever known, and that's what I'm going to be while being thrifty at the same time. I want to have black businessmen on these committees that choose the winners of these contracts. Half of my cabinet is going to be female because I want a kinder, gentler county government. That results in a fairer county government. If you feel that you're being screwed in this procurement process, come and see me Monday morning, and I guarantee you, you're going to have a powerful advocate on your side of the question. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Robin. Rose?
You know, last year I needed to get the wood floors in my home refinished, and I got 3 different bids. And I was thrilled that I was able to select a female-owned Latino company to do that work. It was not the cheapest bid that I got, but it was just exciting that I was able to support a small business in that way. I don't know a lot about the county's procurement process, which is interesting because I worked at the planning department for 13 years, but isn't it surprising that we have a totally different procurement process than the rest of the county, even though we're doing the county's planning. So we already know that there are some economies that could be reached if we were doing procurement differently. But I think what really surprises me, and as I've been sitting here, I just keep looking at this, we are now a majority minority county, and yet I look out at an audience and it is mainly African American faces, and I look up here and it is white faces. And in order to really understand the needs of minority populations, we need to be getting more minorities in office, and we need to be getting more minorities working on the county staff. Ike Leggett did a great job of broadening the table, so to speak, of getting more people at the table, but we still have a long way to go. I know that too often we talk procurement, we say we have something in place for small businesses, but the fact of the matter is that for years the county has done business with certain entities and they still tend to keep doing business with those entities. Like I say, what I'm proud of is when I find someone who I know is good and I can support, I'm more than happy to give them our business.
Thank you very much, Rose. George?
Well, I do know a lot about our procurement process, and I want to acknowledge Councilmember Craig Rice, who just came in, who's also been a great champion for minority suppliers and vendors. The challenge of being an elected official is that you can entertain two facts that are simultaneously true. And so the question is, knowing that elected officials are always pushed and pulled in different directions, who do you trust to have the right values and to protect the most vulnerable and to look out for those who have historically been left behind? If you have a completely fair, objective, well-run, well-managed, competitive bidding process with 5 bidders, you're going to have 4 disappointed people every time. So we can't just pursue hearsay that someone who didn't get a contract says, well, the system isn't any good. You have to pursue facts. You have to find out, is the system fair? Did everyone get a reasonable chance to compete? Understanding that by definition, there will be disappointed bidders. The primary purpose of the procurement process is the efficient delivery of goods and services to meet people's needs. A critical secondary goal is to keep as much of our local tax dollars in the county's economy as we can. But we can't say every tax dollar stays in the local economy because some of you here do business in other jurisdictions. So that if we shut down the ability of other vendors to do business in Montgomery County vendors won't be able to do business in other jurisdictions. The other issue, we absolutely cannot under law tell a bidder that he can review other bids and modify his bid based on someone else's bid. Number one, it's illegal. Number two, it would create unbelievable delays. The other huge complaint we get about procurement is that vendors don't get paid and the services don't get delivered. We do have serious issues in our procurement process. Ike Leggett and Cherie Branson are working on those. If I'm county executive, I will continue to monitor very carefully fairness, minority participation, and speed and efficiency. Sometimes those goals work against each other.
Thank you, George. We're going to start with one more question, if I may. And thank you so much, Kelly. Okay, since we have some more time, Kelly's just informed me, we're going to try to do 3 more questions. Are you all okay with that? Okay, or is there anything, any place you need to go? No, Robin, we don't have all day. Okay, George, may I start with you again? Thank you. Accountability on procurement. How will you hold the procurement department accountable for growing new minority prime contractors?
Experience, training. You need to provide frequent opportunities for people to learn what's coming up. You need to provide opportunities where department heads meet with vendors to give them a long-term view of what will the corrections department be buying, what will the transportation department be needing, what will the police department be needing over the long term, so that all of the vendors, it would be wide open to everyone, have a sense so that they can engage in long-term planning, so that they can work with their suppliers and start to meet the county's needs. Again, some of this is already occurring. I want to give a shout out to my friend, the Honorable Herman Taylor, who is the head of the Minority Business Economic Council, strong supporter of mine, who over time has been trying to assist businesses, some of them in this room, to understand what the county's going to be needing and how can people do a better job of getting in the face of departments. There's also a reciprocal obligation on the vendors themselves. Again, I said it before, if you want to do business with the county, you have to show up, you have to be aware of what the procurement schedules are, you have to register, you have to get certified. The county has an obligation to help, but frequently when I hear from constituents who say, I never get a fair shake from Montgomery County, I ask, well, did you bid? I understand there are discouraged bidders. That's a real problem. We have to work with everybody to provide access, to be fair, to be welcoming, to be in communication. But folks, you know, you can't tell if the system has improved based on an anecdote from 5 or 7 or 11 years ago. You know, give us a chance. And then if there are complaints, if the procurement office isn't working the way you want, our small business navigator, Judy Stevenson, who was introduced earlier, has a great reputation. But if you are disappointed, then let your elected officials hear about it. We want to hear from you. We want this to work well, and we want it to work quickly. It's in everybody's interest that services are delivered, that we don't hold things up for a long period of time in the dark corners of a procurement process that people don't understand. It should be transparent. We should be able to explain it. We should feel proud of it. We should be able to defend it. And if I'm county executive, I will continue to monitor it very, very carefully and closely.
Rose, would you be good enough to answer the question, please? Or would you like me to repeat it?
I know it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and my father owned a small printing business. He printed a lot of political literature. He printed a lot of high school newspapers. We always used to joke that he didn't start making any money until the city of Memphis actually had him start printing the electoral ballots. And back then, when it was still the little punch thing, you had to print it so exactly. And it was a very taxing job, and he had to really be very careful. But he was finally able to make a profit on what he did. So it is truly important that smaller businesses have access to getting some of the procurement dollars. We have a $5.5 billion operating budget. You can only imagine how much procurement the county is actually doing. And we need to figure out if there, I agree with Mr. Leventhal when he said you have to have a fair process. A, people have to put in bids, and B, you have to make sure that the rules are being followed and that you can justify every decision you're making from a procurement standpoint, or we would get a very different type of criticism. But we do need to understand if there are things about the process that are obstacles to small business trying to get in that prime category. And so something that I'd want to look closely at as county executive, you know, what are our procedures? How are our instructions? I don't know about you, I'm one of these people, I look at instructions and they usually sound almost like Greek to me. They're just hard to follow. What am I being asked to do? So how many people are getting eliminated because they didn't actually fill out the form correctly? I do think there's a lot we can do to reach out to make sure that everyone really has access to the system, not just the people who have already done it before.
Thanks so much, Rose. Robin.
Thank you, Robin Ficker here. What do you think the second biggest item in the county budget is? Not police, debt. The problem is debt has tripled over the last several years in Montgomery County, which leaves us less money to spend on procuring things. I'm going to keep that debt down. Just the other day before the county council was the Montrose Parkway. They decided maybe they don't want to build that. There's $100 and some million. So immediately they started thinking about how they were going to spend it. I'd say reduce that county debt so we don't have to have debt service that's increasing 5 times the rate of inflation. We'll have more money to spend on procurement here in Montgomery County. I don't need an advisory committee to tell me what fairness is. I know what fairness is. I've been in court for 40 years watching judges, listening to judges, hearing prosecutors' arguments, defense arguments. I know if a judge is fair because after you've been there a while, you look at the decisions. And if the defendant is losing every case and being found guilty, that judge isn't fair. I want to make sure that we have people who are fair in charge of our procurement process. If they're fair, we're going to have minority businesses winning a fair amount and getting a fair shake. I'm the fair candidate, and I'm not talking about the county fair. I'm talking each and every day. I want to make sure that you are treated fairly by our county government, and if you're not, come and talk to me, and I'll make sure that you are in the future. We're going to have a fair procurement process.
Mark, if you would, please.
Say the question again.
Sure, I'd be glad to. This is about accountability on procurement. How will you hold the procurement department accountable for growing new minority prime contractors?
So I started in this before. I think that we need to be willing to review how contracts are actually given out in the county. I think that, not in terms of slowing down an actual procurement, but at the end of the day, we ought to be pulling contracts and looking at how they were awarded and what the points were and how they were evaluated, and asking ourselves, was this a fair process? Is everything explicable? Does the difference between one bidder and another bidder, does that make sense? And is that playing itself out the way we would have expected to play it out? I think we have to be willing to do more self-examination. I think that's a good thing. I will say, I cannot say this, taking money out of Montrose Parkway and putting it into schools, which is what some of us want to do, and building classroom space, is a procurement project. People will build the schools. There will be contracts for construction. There'll be contracts for equipment in the schools. So everything we do in things like this are procurement projects. I think that as county executive, I'm going to make sure that we have the people in place and processes in place, and that we get constant feedback from the minority community so we know whether they feel this is going in the direction that it needs to go in. Like I said before, there is a wide divergence over minority participation in contracts in some areas. I can tell you construction, very heavy minority participation in contracts. IT and other fields, not so much. And so we need to make sure that it's fair all the way across the board, and that we hear from people about how these processes play out for them. I'd like to see us unbundle contracts. I can bundle contracts so big that it looks fair. You all can bid on it, except almost nobody in the room can handle, for example, cleaning 20 garages in the county. And so a bunch of companies get bumped out because they can't handle the scope of the project. There is no reason to do that. We need to unbundle contracts.
Thank you so much, Mark. David.
So I think the question is around accountability. And so for me, holding a department accountable, if you're not reporting it, you can't track it. And so you need to be transparent. And so I think that's important to maintain accountability. The more difficult question is so how are we going to grow the prime contractors winning business? When I think about that, I think about listening, organizing, and communication. So earlier I mentioned that less than 5% of the businesses that are registered to do business in Montgomery County are minority or female or disabled owned businesses. We've got to improve that. Today it's almost it can be up to a 6-month process to get an MFD certification. So some businesses would go out of business. So we've got to streamline that. And so one of the things that I've proposed is in our government being more proactive to reach out to these organizations to get them MFD certified. And then there's other opportunities. So many of these minority firms would be eligible for small business administration loans or grants through the federal government that we as a county government know about. And so we need to communicate to our businesses, hey, here's an opportunity for you. Here's a grant that you might be available to you. The other thing that we have going on in this county, and we're really fortunate, right? We're right next to the federal government, and they issue billions of dollars of contracts every year. And so in these contracts, right, whether it's for Lockheed Martin or NIH or Johns Hopkins, there's requirements for minority businesses that they need to subcontract that out. And so one of the things that I would do is I would communicate. So we're going to have a database of all our minority-owned firms. And so one of these procurement opportunities comes up, we're going to proactively reach out and say, hey, here's a federal government contract that was just awarded. Here's an opportunity for you to submit a bid for that business.
Thank you so much, David. Roger?
So the question was accountability. One of the recommendations of the 2015 task force on this very question was to create an Office of Procurement Accountability within the Chief Administrator's office. I would implement that recommendation. So If you want accountability, you create someone who insists upon accountability, where we review the processes to make sure we're achieving the objectives that we seek in this county. Marc's observation with respect to unbundling is very important with respect to prime contracting, because if you put out a contract for $100 million, by definition, it is going to limit the pool of people that can participate, that have the scope to do that work. So to the extent to which you can, you need to break it up into smaller chunks so that more people can compete. But bottom line is that we can do a lot more to insist upon accountability in this critically important phase of our county's operation. Because if we are going to be true to the, quote, buy local movement, the county government needs to do its part.
Thank you, Roger. We're going to do something a little different now. Kelly's going to come up, and we're actually going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Kelly?
So as you all know, as small business, we are nimble, right? And we aim to not only know our customer, but also serve our customer. And we heard from a number of you all that you had a desire to answer or ask a couple of questions. So I have one question that I'm going to actually have asked. So if I can have, actually, come on up, Marie. Marie Taylor is going to ask a question. Marie, I'll just have you come up here on the stage so that we can get a full shot. And I need to hold both mics for you.
Oh, okay, the pressure. Hi, how are you? So my question is, and Rose alluded to this a little bit about the fact that there are all white candidates on the panel, and Montgomery County is majority people of color. So my question to you is, how would you change the narrative, or particularly around the use of the word minority, since it's majority people of color? And my two-part question is that, how many people of color are on your staff?
Roger, we'd start with you.
So I do appreciate the question, because we have talked about ourselves being a majority-minority community for too long. We do need to look in the mirror and see who we are. You are who we are. I tell my people, if you want to meet Montgomery County, go to Costco, okay? Go to Montgomery College. There you will see the true face of Montgomery County, which is extraordinary. It is one of the blessings of Montgomery County that we have 170 different cultures, 140 different languages, and we must embrace that and celebrate that fact as being what it is true. So I am proud of my work and my willingness to stand up for the true face of Montgomery County and to recognize that our policies and our programs need to reflect that. I will say on my campaign staff, Manny might be here still, but Manny's our field director, and he's an African-American man that has worked in the Hillary Clinton campaign, and I am proud of my record of being an inclusive employer and of reflecting the diversity of our community and the way in which I go about my work.
Thanks, Roger. David?
Thank you. So the first two individuals that I hired on my campaign were individuals of color. Today our campaign is 2/3 women and slightly more than half is African American and minority individuals. And so from a business community, what I bring is just a keen understanding of how important diversity is. And so whether it's race, religion, gender, even business background, public, private sector, because with diversity, we'll come up with the best solutions. And so clearly I'm a big fan of diversity based on my campaign staff.
My campaign staff's about half. I have an African-American woman who works in my actual county council office. I had an Hispanic woman who went on to work for Hillary Clinton and other people and moved up and up in the world. So the rest of the question is beyond campaign staff, what would you do?
I believe that was the rest of the question. Is that correct?
No. How would you change the narrative around?
How would you change the narrative?
Look, I think that we just have to just decide we're going to reflect the community. And we have to be conscious about our efforts to reflect the community. I don't think we should be, that we're going to be counting and trying to prove we made a point. I think we just have to consciously embrace the idea that we have to start looking like the folks who live in Montgomery County today. I work with a lot of groups, and I constantly encourage folks to get involved in politics and to start taking the steps of getting involved in community associations and everything else it takes to move to a different position. That if you want to be engaged and you want to get elected and you want to be sitting where we're sitting or sitting in county council seats, you've got to start engaging in the community fully. People lose when they only show up for elections. We can pop a lot of candidates up in an election. That's not enough. People have to be in the community all the time, and I'm a big believer in that. I think the most successful people that I think of politically are people who laid down roots, who engaged in community efforts over a long period of time, and people realize that, this is the person I want speaking for them. So I try to encourage that. I tell people there's no shortcut, that this is a long road to getting into politics, and if you're going to take that long road, it's time to start now. And I've encouraged minority candidates. I supported Ike Leggett and Roscoe Nix and all these people going back years because they were absolutely, clearly the best people for the job. And we've got to talk about who's best.
Robin.
You'll have to excuse these other candidates if they seem like nervous wrecks. It's because they're worried sick about June 26th, their primary. Their whole focus is there, whereas I won my primary last night. I'm unopposed. I scared them all out. Don't be surprised if the winner of the Democratic primary doesn't get scared out right after that primary.
So what's your answer, Robin?
When I was at West Point, I had the first African-American squad leader ever at West Point. When I was in the House of Delegates from representing Montgomery County, I was the only person in that lily white delegation who had an African-American intern, Henry Raymond. He left my office and went on to have a nice position with Mayor Schaefer in Baltimore.
So how do you change the narrative? That's the question.
Half of my office, my law office staff, is African American. I'm going to make sure that we're fairly represented throughout the county. You would think that Rosa Parks, Aaron Henry, and the rest of that group would know if someone is treating African Americans fairly. They picked me, a white guy, out of thousands of applicants to be the first general counsel for the National Caucus on the Black Agent. They know something about fairness and discrimination, I would think. I walked with Dr. King in August of '63 when I was working for the office of Tom Morris on the Hill. I picketed at Glen Echo when my teammate from Blair couldn't get into Glen Echo.
To answer Marie's question, the chairperson of my campaign is African American and my volunteer coordinator is African American. But what I want to make clear is I didn't pick them because they were African American. I picked them because they are exceptional people. My chairperson is Mary Wells Harley. She served 8 years on the planning board. And for many years before that, she ran the Department of Recreation and Parks in Prince George's County. And you couldn't find a better person. The same with Lori Joyner, who helped get the African American Museum downtown open on the day it was supposed to. I mean, these are people I knew I could count on. Monday night, I went to an event at the Rockville Library. It was about getting women to run for office. And when it came time for questions from the audience, someone, and I don't know who because they were anonymous, we wrote them on cards, said, well, women tend not to be too good with budgets and numbers. What would you do about that? And thank God one of the speakers said, well, that was a sexist question. Absolutely, that was a sexist question. And we've got to stop this, well, it's them and us. No, it's all of us. And we really need to change the narrative here. Again, this was part of what I worked so hard growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, was to make sure that every member of the population there was getting the rights they deserve, whether it was small business, whether it was procurement, whether it was being able to drink out of the right water fountain. And so I appreciate your question, but what I would really love to see is us not having to count. It would just be clear that we're all part of the same community.
Thank you so much, Rose. George.
I don't like the phrase majority minority. I was an English major. I just don't like it. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense to me. We do not have any majority. We do have substantial disparities. I've been the champion of the African American Health Program, Asian American Health Initiative, Latino Health Initiative to try to address health disparities. Of course, we have enormous wealth disparities. We actually have enormous wealth disparities here on this stage. So we need to be aware of folks who have been historically disadvantaged and provide extra opportunity for those who need extra attention from government. But the narrative is changing. When I look at the younger generation on the county council, which I still consider myself part of, my wife is Latina, my children are Latino, Hans Riemer's wife is African American, Nancy Navarro immigrated here from Venezuela, her husband immigrated here from Haiti. So the narrative is changing as people live here and meet each other and develop families that can't be neatly pigeonholed in a single box. Montgomery County's done a good job of addressing the needs of whites, blacks, Asians, and Latinos, but Montgomery County is a lot more complicated than just those 4 boxes. So the narrative is changing over time, and I think Ike Leggett has done a good job of being responsive to the changing demographics of the community. I think I have a deep and broad understanding of those changing demographics, and as county executive, I'm the only Spanish speaker here on the stage. I have a strong African American Advisory Committee represented here by the chairman, Lisa Henderson. Thank you for your support, Lisa. My campaign staff is 2 women and 1 African American, the Reverend Jeffrey Thames, who is here. My council office, we have 4 people in the council office, headed by a white woman. We have African American senior legislative aide, Ecuadorian origin, native Spanish speaker, and white gentleman. So that's the composition of my staff.
George, thank you so much. You know, there's been several questions and probably some misinformation as well, and we want to make sure that we clarify that. So here to help us with that is the Director of the Office of Procurement, Cherie Branson. Hello. Can we give Cherie a hand, please? Thank you. So I'm going to let you talk.
Hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify a few things. First of all, in the last 2 years, over 30% of our contracts, our new contracts, have gone to vendors that have never done business with the county before. 2, when I took over this office, the number of minority, female, disabled-owned businesses that got contracts was 18%. In 2.5 years, it's now 23%. Excuse me. 3, we have a debriefing system that I instituted, and we have quarterly certification workshops for minority businesses. As a matter of fact, there's one going on today, this morning, in Rockville. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherie. Okay, candidates, I have one final question, and I'm going to ask you, some of you in particular, to keep your answers to 1 minute, if you would, in the essence of time. And so this time I think that we will start with Roger, if you don't mind. And here's my question. Explain why you'll be good for black business in Montgomery County and create a jurisdiction where they can grow and prosper.
So I sought to explain that in the very first question as somebody who started a small business, who understands small business, who cares deeply about small business, who created the microloan program in Montgomery County in order to provide seed capital for small businesses, particularly for those people who don't have access to credit. I was told the story the other day of a woman, a black woman business leader who had to go to a loan shark because she could not get a loan from a normal bank. That minute does go quickly.
That minute does go quickly.
Oh, that's 30. Thank you. I apologize. Okay. So, at any rate, I am deeply committed to this work. I am deeply committed to working with black businessmen and women to make sure that our county benefits from your great work and that we assist you in doing and thriving in Montgomery County. The whole core of my campaign is increasing shared prosperity in our county. And so if I do have the privilege of serving you, that is who I will be. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roger. David, please.
So having built both large and small companies in Montgomery County, I think I have a unique experience of the opportunities and the challenges here, and have brought forth the policies and approach to cultivate business growth. We've talked about how we're going to raise capital, entrepreneurship programs, how we're going to do a better job of awarding county government business and federal business. But another thing that we need to do is we need a strong buy local campaign. I was with a female-owned business yesterday, Dress It Up Dressing. They send to get their salad dressing filled, they send it to Wisconsin, and then they sell it to the DC public schools. They can't sell it here locally. In Des Moines, Iowa, they figured out if they just can increase buy locally by 5%, they can generate an extra $1 billion of economic opportunity. So one of my jobs will be promoting your businesses to other businesses to make Montgomery County first.
Thank you, David. Mark.
Rob, sorry. Thank you. You'll get it soon enough. So if I'm your county executive, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to do things differently. We're not in this room and we're not having this conversation because everybody thinks things are going swimmingly in Montgomery County. We have tried to do a lot of things and we try to do a lot of things right. But trying to do and arriving at the place you need to be are two different things. And I don't think we're yet in the place that we need to be. So I'm deeply committed to this. I see this as a fundamental issue of social justice. The whole reason we have point systems is that we recognize that you just can't simply make this business dealings a simple economic equation because that doesn't deal with historic disparities that exist in communities. And I think we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to address those differences and make sure that everybody gets opportunities and we try to level a playing field that historically was unlevel. So I'm deeply committed to that. And I promise you as county executive, I will meet with you, I will work with you, I will engage in self-examination.
Robin, 1 minute.
I tend to see things that never were and say, why not? When the council passed unanimously a plan to jam 2 million new square feet of development in Westbard, and which were paved over the African-American cemetery plots, I was outraged. And I marched with Walter Fauntroy an entire Sunday afternoon going over those spots and strongly recommend a museum there to commemorate that African-American heritage and will not allow HOC to build over that cemetery. Women. I had the definitive sex discrimination case in Montgomery County where a federal judge ruled that the county government had to stop rating female job applicants from upper to lower quarter as the physique and facial features and had to stop asking.
Move on to Rose now. Rose, if you would, please. Yes, it was.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. When I was the mayor of Rockville, I think what people recognized is that I really was there for everyone in our town. I wanted them to feel good about where they live, not just certain neighborhoods of the city, but all neighborhoods of the city. And I worked hard to go out and do walking town meetings in all parts of our city and to work with our nonprofit group so I could hear and see what their problems really were because they were the ones dealing with some of the less advantaged citizens in our community. That's what I want to do for the county. One of the reasons I got into this race was our demographics have changed, but I don't feel that the narrative has. We're still mainly listening to the same 100 people who go from room to room, so to speak, and not truly listening to everyone else. If we continue in that way, this county will not succeed. We've seen evidence of it heading down the wrong road. I hope you will elect me on June 26th because I believe that I am the one who can change the narrative in this county to include all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. George, please.
As I've described earlier, I have been the County Council's primary champion for minority suppliers and vendors, along with Councilmember Craig Rice, who's here. I've delved deep into the procurement process to understand how we can make it work better and more fairly. We are tightly constrained by the law and by Supreme Court decisions, but despite what Robin suggested, I'm not afraid of lawyers. One of my favorite stories is when Cherie Branson was on the County Council and the Task Force on Minority Procurement that Roger mentioned earlier was urging us to adopt a much stronger target and a larger number for set-asides, and the county attorney said, if you do that, we'll be sued, and Cherie Branson said, well, it depends who's doing the suing, doesn't it? So everybody has rights, and everyone can exercise their rights. The question is, Do you elect someone who shares your values, who will be a strong advocate for you, understanding the constraints under which we operate, understanding that not 100% of bidders can be satisfied? Do you have a fair and transparent process that gives everyone a chance? And are you doing strong outreach to explain to potential bidders the opportunities that exist?
Appreciate your responses. Esteemed candidates and county friends, I'd like to thank you for an enlightening and informative discussion today about the issues affecting county citizens. Now, this has been especially instrumental in helping to shape our opinions and open the windows of understanding about issues that impact the African American business community. And more than anything, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to serve as your moderator. Have a great day.
For attending today. It was a pleasure to hear your points of view on minority business in the county. We look forward to holding you accountable to the points of view that you have set up here for us today. We look forward to meeting with you, having conversations with you, making sure that you know that the conversation about black business doesn't stop when the election is over. It just starts then. So we'll make sure that we're holding you accountable, having the conversations. I know that we have met with some of you. We will continue those meetings to make sure that our legislative agenda is being met, and that's much better, being met in the county and also at the state level. So we are working toward that on a regular basis. I need to make sure that the people in the audience understand that we are about black business. There are a lot of things that we discussed today, a lot of questions that were asked, but we want to make sure that we're about promoting the agenda of black business in Montgomery County. So when we ask a question, we are looking for the answer about black business. We're looking for the answer about black business for access to capital. We're looking for that about access to prime contracting. We want more black businesses to be prime contractors on a local level and a state level. So we're going to hold you accountable to those numbers, and we will make sure that that accountability is very transparent. So the things that you said today, we welcome you. We welcome the conversation. Reach out to us. Let's partner again and make sure that we're moving that conversation forward. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, fantastic. I do need to thank a bunch of people, volunteers. We had a fantastic group of volunteers that pulled this off, including the Montgomery County Black Business Council. So, are there people from the council in the room? Yes, I see you, Wendy. Fantastic. Can we give them a round of applause? So those are the people that reached out to the candidates, did all of the hard work, made sure that everything got together for today, invited most of you, sent those emails out. They have been just a flurry of work plans and flyers and information. So I appreciate all of their hard work to make this happen. They're an affinity group of the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, which is open to members to be on the planning committee. But if you are interested in continuing the conversation, we will be having an opportunity to network with the county council at large candidates. So stay tuned for that next thing to come up in your email and make sure that you join us again. Don't forget that there's opportunity to network today, and I do need to thank our sponsors. Have them on a separate sheet. Okay. Harbor Bank. We really appreciate Harbor Bank as our platinum sponsor. Caldy Social House, MCM Montgomery Community Media, Upstart Connectors, Coca-Cola, MTech Solutions, WH Consulting. I know all of these companies, I feel like they're members of us and we network with them regularly. Sinorama of Silver Spring and Twins Fashion International. I think I got everything. Thank you. I think I got everything that I was supposed to say, and I want to make sure that you guys know the importance of continuing this dialogue. Remember, it does not stop here. It continues by voting. Please don't forget to vote. We need to make sure that this counts. And you need to make sure that you join a minority chamber in your area, that you're connected with it. You're free to join us. We're the Maryland Black Chamber. These are love. So join us. But if not, connect with your business community and make sure that you're making a statement. Thank you very much. Continue to network, and a lot of you still have some time.